All right, so one of the things that you're going to need to figure out is which one of the techniques you want to use depending on the circumstances. So for this one, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the worm view. Now I've just noticed this pattern here of the lights. And again, most photographers, when they start, they'll just take the picture from where they are. But I want to show you really quickly how that might look different if I took this and choose a more creative angle to capture it. So I'm lowering the camera down as low to the ground as I can get, and I think I'm going to get a little bit closer to this light. And so you'll see that the pattern's still there, but it flattens out everything. And then you got some other creative choices about how you're going to frame this. So I might even tilt it down a little bit more. So now I'm seeing a little bit more of the tile, and I might line that up a little bit more straight. Or I might tilt it up just a tad so that I can actually see the hallway. And then of course you have the ability to focus. So put your finger on the area that you want to be as sharp as you can. So this gives you kind of a blurred out effect because it's a narrow depth of field, and take your shot.
Well, I'll be the first to admit this is kind of a boring shot. I don't really have a strong subject. Just having a tile is not good enough. But one thing that did work really well by just circumstance is that with the shot being really low, it was able to kind of minimize someone who's walking in. So, that was one thing I thought worked pretty well for that shot.
All right, so another technique that we use, that we talk about, like the framing and the reflection of that, is the bird's eye view. And a bird's eye view doesn't necessarily need to be up way in the sky. This could be a bird's eye view shot. If we went a little bit wider, it'd give a little bit more of that distortion, kind of like how that spacing of the light looks. So that could work. But you also might want to look for opportunities where you can get elevated. Be careful. I don't want anybody climbing trees or ladders or putting themselves in a dangerous position. But when you see an opportunity to find an interesting subject, using the bird's eye perspective, this is what you're looking to do, is to give that straight down look. Now, I want these two tables. I'm going to zoom in just a tad. How about just one? And that is a pretty good representation of applying the bird's eye view technique. And so basically what you're doing is you're looking for other opportunities to get above the subject and look straight.
So this isn't quite my favorite shot, but it's a decent one. It's got a lot going for it. It's got a lot of shapes. The squares and the reflection and the lights makes my feet look really small. And they're already pretty small, so the extra exaggerated smallness is another factor of that. But again, the stronger the subject, the better it is. So at least there's something going on with this that I liked. With this shot, it's a pretty straightforward shot. It's at least able to see the shapes. So you got that circular shape and the shape of that. I kind of had to do it at an angle based on where I was at. Again, an okay subject. At least it's demonstrating the principle, but I would probably hope for a better subject to be one of my best shots.
Okay, so if you're looking to apply the look straight up technique, you might want to be careful when you're looking up for opportunities to take this picture. But basically the angle is to get underneath the subject and find something interesting that you can shoot. Now there's a nice spot right by the auditorium that is the most frequently photographed spot in the school by applying this technique. But this is actually one of my favorite spots. It's the band room, and when you look up, you see a nice repetition of pattern. And so I'm directly below it right now, pointing the camera up, and what I'm doing right now is really paying attention to how those light beam bars are spaced, because I'm trying to get it as even as I can. And to accentuate that, I might also zoom out a bit. I might try one like that too, to get a little bit more of that repetition. So I might take this picture and as an alternate, just focus on one of the patterns and get all four of those lights around. So again, if you're going to do this technique, just be sure that you watch where you're going, especially if you're walking around the room all over the school outside looking for that opportunity to look straight up at an object. But as always, that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be something way above you. A straight up angle could work like this, where your subject is just kind of at an odd angle. So it could be a person or it could be a cat or whatever it is, but the key is to catch them from the bottom looking up. Hopefully that helped.
With this particular shot, I've been wanting to go back to that room for a long time. I think it turned out fairly well. I like the wider angle of it. to be able to capture more of the pattern, the repetition. I like the way that since I was centered underneath that central square, it just let all four of those lights kind of protrude from there and create some sort of radial balance. So I think this is a pretty strong shot for looking straight up.
So one of the most difficult parts about the twist is just figuring out how and why and when you're going to use it. Obviously, you can take any picture and twist it, but keep in mind what you're doing is you're changing the whole composition. So in this case, it's a really low light shot of auditorium, and I'm kind of looking at these lines that are created by the alleys. And I'm gonna have to work with this because I know if I zoom out, I'm not gonna have the time lapse, but I wanna get a good image. So a straight shot would be like this. If you twist it a bit, it's gonna send the whole thing off kilter. And what I'm doing is I'm manipulating the framing and what's in the shot and what's out of the shot. Okay, that wasn't exactly what I wanted. I'm gonna turn the flash off and try again for a long exposure. Holding it as steady as I can. And again, while this is technically a different subject, you want to keep trying finding subjects that would really take advantage of this technique. So if I take this alleyway and get a little bit lower, again, kind of combining some ideas about angle, that's the straight on view. But if I twist it, now I'm creating more of a diagonal. It almost doesn't really show. And now that I see that, when I roll my camera out, I can actually see another shape and another line, so it's going to accentuate the twist. And I'm almost lining up that aisle with the rule of thirds line, which we'll talk about in another lesson. So I'm going to take that picture too. And again, so really what you're looking for is some sort of altered perception of what you see, and by adding a twist, and you can go full twist or kind of a partial twist, just a very subtle twist, just to emphasize and create a different view of that, whatever it is that you're taking a picture of. So knowing when to use a twist is kind of a catch.
So this shot is a little grainier than I thought it would be. It got a lot more light because of the long exposure, but I do like how it's balanced, and it's balanced along the diagonal. And then like I said in the video, you know, the lines that I was working with and kind of trying to create that tilt, I think that this was a good subject to work with. Maybe not the best subject, but definitely made it a little bit more interesting to look at. This shot, I think, emphasized the twist a little more because it's really, really clear how that twist is working on just one element of the photograph. So I think it's a little bit stronger. It's also a little bit more subtle of a twist, so it just kind of influences the way, instead of having the kind of traditional, like you're looking straight up the aisle, it's got that angle. So I think it would be strong enough to be a decent shot.
So I'm walking along and all of a sudden, I just missed an opportunity for some photography. What do I mean? Well, if you take a look at any subject and get closer to it, you're able to exaggerate it. And so in this particular case, I'm not trying to do the staff sign in right now, I noticed this plant. And I love this sign here too. This is for our school secretary, Miss Niway. Here sits the queen. That in itself would be a nice shot. But I'm gonna work on the plant. I'm gonna get a little bit closer, and basically the thing that I walked by and didn't notice in and of itself can be an interesting subject if you fill the frame with it, and that means getting close and making sure that it's in focus. Now there's still a lot of creative options that you could do. Do I want to go straight down and below, and again kind of combining the bird's eye view angle, or do I want to have a kind of a cant, like a twist? But the key thing here is I want that filling the frame so that I've got an interesting subject. I'm almost to the point now where every single piece of this frame is filled by that subject. Some areas are out of focus, so I could change my focal point by touching the screen on where I want to be focused. Keep in mind that some things will be in focus and others will be out. And then when I'm ready, take the shot. So when you're thinking about things, basically, if you want to exaggerate something, just find something that looks like it could be interesting. Oh, hey, look, there's something over there. And then I'll get a little bit closer. Decide about where you want that frame to be. Might just exaggerate the top because that's a more interesting form. Frame your shot, take it.
So this shot turned out okay. I think I would want to get just a little bit closer. What I was happy with when I took a second look at it is how the color of the yellows and the oranges accentuate the shape and the form of the leaf. And then, you know, definitely I couldn't get the whole thing in focus. It tends to focus kind of on those dusty parts. There's some radial balance, so if you look at the center and everything kind of emanates from the center, that's a concept we'll touch on later. But I thought that the shot and the subject worked out fairly well for exaggerating and getting really close to a plant that could have been passed up. My initial take on this subject was that I was going to use the pattern on there, but I ended up liking kind of how the form of this worked, and especially the way that it reflected light. The background was fairly neutral, so it gave a little bit even more emphasis on just that form, just the shape of the top of that bowl. So I think it was a pretty strong one for exaggerating. And again, it's the little things and little details that you're able to show if you fill the frame with them that make that count.